Well, good evening. My name is Noelle Tickey, and I serve as Director of Teaching and Learning. At the last board meeting, the Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment team shared information regarding our balanced assessment system. Board members, you should have the handout that references the balanced assessment system in your packet. During that presentation, we focused on the columns to the far right, which reflect summative evidence of student learning, which should be used for monitoring purposes. One of the results of this presentation was a request by the board to have a panel of educators discuss the assessments that are used in everyday practice. Okay. Which are reflected in the columns to the left. These assessments are referred to as formative, which means they are more frequent and inform day-to-day decision-making. It is essential that we provide stakeholders information on the meaning and importance of a balanced assessment system and how this plan plays out at the building level, which is what we hope to accomplish this evening. Before we get started, I would like each panel member to introduce themselves.
Leader at Weeks Middle School.
Audrey Reekin, the principal at Weeks Middle School.
Mike PENTEK, 8th grade literacy teacher at Harding Middle School.
Maureen Taylor, principal, Harding Middle School.
Kathy Danielson, principal, Roosevelt High School.
Rose Neal, geometry teacher, Roosevelt.
Erin Boudreau, I teach 2nd grade at Findley Elementary.
And Tara Owen, principal at Findley Elementary.
Okay. I will direct questions to each level individually, but I invite anyone on the panel to elaborate on responses at any time. So, first question, elementary. Teacher collaboration is a necessity for successful implementation of a balanced assessment system because teachers need time to design assessments and analyze student data. This is represented in row 4 that outlines who is responsible for creation on your handout. Can you tell us about the collaborative structures that are in place in your building that allow for this?
I'll start out a little bit as far as comparing what we learned from last year to the balanced assessment system that has been implemented this year. And moving from more of a district-led assessment system to more of a teacher-driven assessment has been huge, and we are correct. The collaboration and the time needed for teachers to truly develop and implement and adjust their instruction to design these common formative assessments is significant. Because of that, we looked at the structure of our schedule, and we are making sure, and we also looked at our data teams for this year. So teachers data team twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then they collaborate as a team at least on Monday or Friday, and oftentimes on both. And when doing that, last year our data teams was really focused on the data piece of it, but we have shifted that a little bit to make sure that teachers have time to not only look at their data, but then are also designing the common formative assessment during this time in response to the data that they are collecting. So with that, Erin has mastered this and is going to talk a little bit more about designing the common formative assessments and then also the time needed by teachers to do that.
Hello. I'd like to say that we at Findley have been given the time to create common formative assessments. We've also been given the time to look at data, and it's very structured. So we're creating our pre and our post test, unless it's a district test. Other than that, we use our monitoring minutes to guide our CFAs, our common formative assessments, which we use then to group students. We also make sure that we have a set teacher expectation so that we're all on the same page. We score using rubrics, our common formative assessments as well. And it's been wonderful. It's a wonderful time for us to be able to get together and collaborate on a daily basis, an hour a day. So,
any other structures?
I would agree with Findley and what they're talking about. I think it's up to the building administrator to set that time within their schedule. And I know in our building that's a priority for us. So our teachers have collaborative time every day built into their schedule. They don't have to meet before or after school. on their own time to do that. And we also, because of our grant funding right now, are able to give them an extra hour every week paid to do that. So in working with the teacher teams, teacher leadership teams within our building, we've held that as a priority in our scheduling and how we do things in our building to continue to have that collaboration time built into their daily schedule.
Thank you. We have been working to increase the number of assessments that are designed by teachers to be used in a more frequent, informal manner. And this is what we refer to as our formative assessments. Please explain the difference between formative assessment, which are reflected in the columns to the left, and summative assessment, which is reflected on the right. Middle school.
For our purposes, formative can be anything for us, for anything as far as just gauging, getting a quick gauge of student understanding. It can be spur of the moment. It can be a quick check for us just to see who's understanding what's been discussed, all the way to a common formative assessment, which for my teacher team, we do once a week. And that forms our instruction for the following week. We check for understanding, we goal set with the students, and we try and plan out our next week's instructions based on their assessments and their work the previous week. So it's constantly forming and changing. The difference that we use, our summative is restricted to only at the end of the unit, or in our case, the end of the semester for the district benchmark. It's still formative in nature. It's still going to give us good information for what the students know and understand, but it comes at the very end, and it is a summation of what they've been working on the entire unit instead of working on an individual specific skill.
Just a point of clarification to address some of the questions that came up prior to this panel. I think there's some misconception when we use the word assessment that it means test, and it doesn't mean test. It's a way of measuring where students are at in their learning, so it can be very authentic. It can be very project-based. A component of a project. It does not have to be a multiple choice test or a quiz. And so I think that's a big learning we've had is helping staff understand that it can be a lot more than just a test. But I think the word assessment a lot of times equates test in a lot of people's mind, and that is not what it is. It can be a writing sample. It could be, in the case of an aviation kind of thing, it could be something they have to show that they have mastered in terms of some particular mechanical thing that they've learned. That would be formative along the way to the end summative type assessment that they have.
I'd like to expand also that with what we were talking about at elementary, it's critical for the collaboration piece because formative assessments aren't just something that's given to teachers to use on students. It's very critical for those teachers to create those in a collaborative environment with one another to help guide their instruction. So they need to be given the time to create the assessments. They also need to be given the professional development on how to create those. It's also critical that we teach teachers how to examine the data, because just giving the assessment is a moot point. They have to be given the tools to examine that data to let it inform the instruction, because that's the end all. We can continue to assess, test, or what have you students, but unless it combines with the instructional component, we're really not going to make gains in student achievement.
I can add on a little bit to that. For years, this is my 9th year teaching 2nd grade, and in the past I always gave assessments. I gave whatever the district told me that we were supposed to test. Now that we have moved to creating these assessments during our data teams, we take the priority standards, we look at them, we unwrap them, we decide what's most important for the students to learn, and then we create. We have a stake now in the tests. We know what we want our students to learn, and I'm not giving an assessment to give an assessment. I'm giving an assessment now to really see what they know, and we use that data in a completely different way than I ever have in the past. So it's been a very positive experience.
And isn't it, I'm asking but telling also, the triangulation of curriculum, instruction, and assessment that makes it so powerful for students. Because when you say we're teaching or assessing what we want, we're assessing based on the core.
Yes.
which is our curriculum, and we're doing assessments that we've created so that we can drive our instruction in our classroom. That's where student achievement is. And one last thing I want to expand upon is the summative assessment. Some people say if we have formative assessments, why do we still need summative assessments? We need that large-scale type of test so that what I believe summative assessments provide teachers, administrators, and school districts is data points for programs for children. So we can look at an Iowa assessment or a BRI or an SRI or those kind of things, and they provide us a path that students might need to venture on, an intervention or an acceleration. Those are those large-scale data points that we also need as well.
Okay, thank you. Next question. This is for high school. Briefly describe an example of a formative assessment and how you use the data.
I'm going to turn it over to Rose after I say that you're probably thinking, oh, high school, you know, they're way behind the times. They're the dinosaur of us all, because elementary and middle schools
Nobody's thinking that.
No. I have to say to introduce this that I was in Des Moines high schools and taught for 24 years. And high schools today don't look like they did when I taught in them. And that's good news, because we don't work in isolation anymore, and we've certainly taken lots of good tips from our elementary and middle school colleagues who I know have been much more committed to collaboration. But I think we've done quite a remarkable job of changing the culture. So with that, Rose, who is a wonderful math teacher, needs to address what I think this has to come from a teacher. What do formative assessments look like, Rose?
I think, like KRISTY said, it really has helped us to move away from the textbook and just teaching from that, and really looking at, okay, here's the standards that we have available, here's the benchmark test that was developed, and how can we do some minor testing of it. Right now we're doing volume. And so thinking about some of the different things that we are expecting kids to know at the end of the unit, and then what do they also need to know in the process. And so just having those building blocks, especially in math, it's really easy to have some building blocks where you are able to say, okay, this is what they need and this is where we're going. It's very helpful to have that collaborative time, whether it's course alike, where we can get together and really look at those standards, and then form the formative assessment, and then look at the results together. And then even as a math PLC at Roosevelt, it's good also to have conversations amongst the courses to kind of get, especially get an idea of what is it that I'm really doing in Algebra 1 that will help with Algebra 2, and then, you know, all of that sequencing has also helped. So I know I'm deviating a little bit from that, but it really is truly being able to go beyond that textbook and look at the curriculum, the instruction, the strategies that we can use to help differentiate with, you know, that's one of the biggest things that I really enjoy, is to be challenging yet supporting every student in my classroom.
And I know at a middle school and an elementary level that data is used in many different ways, and I think that's kind of what the question is related to. Teachers at my building will take their formative assessment data and decide whether a skill based on that data needs to be taught again to the whole group using a different instructional strategy, or if there's a pocket of children they see a data trend with that just are missing a piece of that skill, they'll form a small flexible skills group, and the following day remediate that skill deficit right away. I've seen teachers incorporate a trend in their data to a station where kids can move through that need that reteaching and so forth. Or I've also seen teachers take a skill that they've seen students do poorly on a formative assessment and infiltrate it into their warm-ups the following week. So it's something that's trending continuously through their instruction.
I think also it's important to note when looking at those formative assessments and then using that data, that time that we've talked about having the teachers come together during collaboration, it's not just the classroom teachers. We're also making sure that the special education teachers, the title teachers, and the support teachers are there analyzing that data right alongside with the classroom teachers. So we can look at adjusting that instruction right then, not just in the classroom, but in all areas of that student's day. And that's huge, getting that whole entire team to buy in on that data and then work as a team to shift that.
Okay, thank you. How do you communicate academic progress to students and parents? Middle school.
Feedback is very important as we're working with our students, because as they're progressing along, they need to know what it is that they need to fix, or how do they improve, what do they do next to make sure that they're growing, their progress is going along as it should be. Also, we want the students to be involved in their progress. So we keep a lot of data sheets, or the students keep data sheets. They chart their own growth, they have graphs, so that they can be aware of how they're doing. Communication to the parents, as always, is key. You need to be working as a team to have that parent involvement with what we're doing at school, so that they're aware of that communication we have to have. And I just want to address just briefly my population at my school. It's kind of relevant here tonight is we have a large ELL population at our school, and so communicating with those parents and our students is very important. And we do a lot of, as we've learned, simple visualization for our students and parents on where we want them to be, where they're at right now, when it's time to celebrate, those kind of things. So communication is key.
Yeah, we do something very similar. I completely agree that the feedback, and that it's timely, and by nature that it's coming back to the student quickly, so that they're not getting their grades on something that happened weeks ago. It's quick. It comes, the turnaround is very quick, so that they can make changes, so that they know their errors in thinking, so that we can make changes and make corrections, not only for ourselves but the students. And last year, my group of teachers started to develop checklists that the students engage with every week. So the students track their own learning, their own understanding. So if there is a deficiency, they can see it and have that conversation of, why am I missing all of these, but the other ones are all colored in? Well, that's because you've missed it every test. Let's come in and let's work on this. And it's really helped have the students own their grade, instead of having, Mr. PENTEK, you gave me this, it's, I earned this, or I didn't earn this. Having that change in just the terminology and how the students are talking about it has made huge changes. And it's a new process. Having the students understand it, it's still new. Having the teachers understand it is still new. But it's been very, very helpful in communicating this to the students, where they stand on specific skills. Not, well, what's my grade? Is it a B minus? Do I at least have a B? That kind of thing. It's more to the effect of, how am I doing on this skill? Am I understanding this skill? And that's a complete mind shift for myself, for the teachers that I work with, and for the students.
Thank you. This next question's for elementary, but any of you can respond. The statement has been made that we are over-assessing our students. Do you agree or disagree, and why?
I'd like to start, and I kind of want to jump on where you are when talking about the middle school. Our second graders at Findley, as well as every other grade level at Findley, we also are very intentional on when we teach. And my second grade students, we do I can statements. So we look at the priority standard, we unwrap it, we come up with our I can statements, and there's always a purpose for everything that happens in the classroom. So my students know exactly what they're learning, why they're learning it. Every assessment that I give in my classroom, my students know what's expected of them. They have the I can statement in front of them to know what they have to be able to do in order to achieve that goal. And I think that it's been so rewarding. We have data walls where when the students accomplish that, they're able to move their data to show that progress, as well as the other part I was thinking of when I was listening was that they're able to, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I'm going to go on with the second question, then I'll come back to that.
Okay.
As far as over-assessing, I feel that we assess the right amount. One thing that I was thinking of that we've talked about already this evening is that assessing looks different than it used to in the past. So where it's not pencil and paper, a lot of times my assessments are clicker reviews where the students are answering questions with technology. A lot of times it's whiteboards where I'll ask a question and they hold up the whiteboard with the answer, and right away I can say, okay, I can make a mental note, who has it, who doesn't. Many times I'll use a graphic organizer where I'll look at the explicit lesson or explicit teaching process where it's the I do, they do, we do, and then they do on their own. And just that last piece of the they do, I can tell who has it and who does it. So it's not your typical testing where it's pencil paper.
And I think that's been a little bit of a shift with the instruction and with our data teams, that everything that we ask of our students or the different things our students do, there's a purpose, and that purpose is a mini assessment for us to give us feedback to know what our students know and the direction we need to take. And that's, stating that everything has a purpose in the classroom versus just turning the page or reading a story for the sake of reading it. Every single thing gives the teacher feedback, which then ultimately gives the students feedback too. So oftentimes the students have no idea that they're getting assessed when it's really truly just giving us information to figure out what we need to do differently or in addition to.
And it came to me. So what I was thinking was immediate feedback. When we are doing formative assessments in the classroom, there is immediate feedback. My kids know right away, and I don't leave them. If they don't understand it, I would never just say, nope, you don't understand it. We are then right away reteaching, I'm explaining, I'm showing them, and then I'm giving them another opportunity to be able to prove that they can accomplish that task.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd just like to add, with the whole idea of the over-assessing, while I was at Orchard Place, I had to kind of do an evaluation of what the kids knew as they came in, because they came in all kinds of times of the year. And what really helped was just really communicating to the kids that, because of course math phobia is horrible, but I just tried to ease their pain and just say, let's communicate. This is a way for you to communicate to me mathematically. And I used that even today in class. I said, this is just so you can show me what you know right now of what we've been doing in class. And I think easing some of that and getting away from that whole, here's the test, and just getting away from that, I think has been helpful for students.
Okay, thank you. This next question is for high school. What are some of the challenges or barriers you encounter in implementation of the balanced assessment system?
When we're up here in a panel, I'm sure you can say, well, they're so polished and this must be really easy work. And let me just tell you, this is not easy work. It is really difficult work. And if you could visit some of our data teams in our schools, we have 14 at Roosevelt in the 4 academic core areas, or MAT school, or any of our schools. It's pretty impressive to sit with teachers of like subjects and listen to the hard work that they engage in every day when they collaborate. So one big challenge, especially for high school, is that doggone master schedule. When you're trying to create a master schedule to serve every student, wherever they're going, and many of them leave your building at various times during the day, and then you have to be very committed as a leader to say to your scheduling folks, no, you have to give that plan time to those teachers every other day. For us, it's an A-B block. You have to remain committed to that. So it's extremely important that we all practice professional learning communities as a culture of work. If you don't, I think you're in big trouble, because you don't have that model, that expectation that we are going to always focus on what Rose said, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and we're going to gather just consistently to take a look at how our students are doing. What is it we want them to know, understand, and do? How are we going to know when they do it? How are we going to know when they know it? And that's the big question in terms of the assessment plan. I also have to add that when you go to the data team, a challenge always is sometimes their teachers just are hardworking folks, and so they get very frustrated, and I'll sit with the team and I'll hear them say, you know, with this attendance, if they would just come consistently, and if the parents would care, and if they weren't missing the skills, and then they stop, and they'll go back on track. You know, you have to help them sometimes, and they'll use that T word, that's time. There's never enough time. There never will be enough time, and yet they will all tell you that that time they now spend together, they're planning together. They're talking about students together. They're addressing the needs of kids together, and it's irreplaceable. Last is, I think our district is, we're going to find this challenge. I think I can just feel this coming in PD big time. Rose mentioned it. To differentiate instruction, when you answer that question, is really difficult. It's a big challenge for us in high school. When you do the assessments and you're faced with 25 students, and how are you going to offer enrichment for these kids who already get it? How do you pull these kids up to the standard, and then the middle? And that's not an easy task. So we are constantly talking about professional development, and I send them to Tomlinson every year, to Virginia, a group, to learn more and more about how do you differentiate instruction in very meaningful ways. Challenges.
Okay, thank you. Last question. This is for anyone. Is there anything else you would like the community to know about our balanced assessment system and how this looks in your building?
I think it's just a way we do, it's the way we do business. I mean, I don't see it as separate from instruction. It is a part of how we instruct. It's how, with our blocks in our particular building, we have 89-minute blocks for our core areas. They start with a mini assessment to see where the kids are coming in. They assess at least midway through that 89-minute block, and again at the end of the block with something very simple, so that they are tracking for that whole time, that they're not off teaching a lesson that they feel good about, but they're actually seeing is what they're teaching translated into learning for students. And so the need for them to plan for that daily, and then it's just a part of how they do business, I think it's not a separate add-on to what they do.
And I think it gives students an opportunity to show what they know more than one time. You know, if we just relied on summative assessment, and who knows what happened to that kid the night before, even that day, and what's going on with their family, you know, the results of that assessment can be totally skewed. And I really think just being able to balance it all and giving them more than one opportunity is really important.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the bad testing. I am that person. You know, if I know it's a big deal, I'm going to like get anxious and nervous, and so then I would not do well. I wouldn't show my best. Mm-hmm. But knowing that, okay, you have a couple opportunities, or if you don't do well today, you can fix it tomorrow. I think that does a lot for our students. The other piece is that what Maureen was talking about is that it's not this big, huge test. They're little things. It's not in addition to anything that we're doing. It's doing what we're doing with a purpose. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're not just kind of asking 5 questions about, did you understand the story? Who wore the red hat? Give me that answer. It's each question has a purpose, and we're finding out where the gaps are in understanding. And I know it's made me a better teacher, just kind of thinking differently. It's helped my instruction. I know that I've helped my students understand my content better.
I think as well, I think a lot of our tests in the past have been multiple choice. So the students either pick A, B, or C to find out the right answer. And I know that now that we're creating our own common formative assessments, a lot of them are open-ended. They're constructed responses where the students have to think outside of the box to actually see their thinking and to think beyond just multiple choice.
Okay, thank you very much. This concludes our discussion. I'd like to thank our panel members for your participation. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Murphy for any clarifying questions for the panel.
If anybody has any questions of the panel, step to the microphone and ask your question. I do.
Step to the microphone. Murphy, if you'd like to step to the microphone, please.
My name is Dick Murphy. I live at 3800 Crestmore Place. I've never been able to say that. I would like to address the issue of time, and I guess I'd like to ask the 3 principals here, because you've all talked about time, and 4 principals. But one of the elementary principals in middle and high school. How much time do you have? Because I heard you talk about, you know, at the high school with the block scheduling, and there's a time that is reserved for that. I'd like to know, elementary, how much time do you have to collaborate? Middle school, how much time do you have to collaborate? And high school, how much time do you have to collaborate? And I'll sit down.
During the day, the teachers have, so this doesn't count the time before school or after school. So just looking at what we designate as collaborative time, our teachers have an hour on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, so a total of 4 hours, and then 35 minutes on Wednesday. So an hour daily and then a half hour on that Wednesday, in addition to their time before and after school.
At our middle school building, all of our teachers have an 89-minute block of planning time every day. That is used for various purposes. 1 day a week definitely is around data team. The others are around collaborative planning and work around that, also around behavior issues that we deal with. But as I mentioned, because we have a school improvement grant, we also have an additional hour every Wednesday morning that's paid for out of our grant funding, where we do vertical teams, which we aren't able to do in our schedule. So the entire math department, the entire literacy department meets for an hour to then share data, share CFAs, and move forward with collaboration.
And at our middle school, every day there's 39 minutes that they dedicate 3 days a week to data teams and then 2 days a week as collaboration.
At Roosevelt, they have some personal plan time, but they have collaborative time. That's in the like subjects. Generally, that's 2 teachers plus a special education teacher if they're collaborating. They'll have 90 minutes every other day. Now, they don't use every bit of that because we do a little intervention, little response to intervention during that. We have some guided studies, so they may have 6 to 8 students that 2 teachers are also keeping track of and watching, but they do a really good job of actually handling both of those pieces. So probably in the course of, if they get an opportunity to meet 3 times, 3 90 minutes in 1 week or 2 times, they're going to use for sure one of those blocks for data teaming, for collaboration of some sort. Plus, on the building-directed Wednesdays, often we are working in our PLCs. The PLC, for example, Rose's, is all her math department. That is vertical planning. We'll use our grant money sometimes. We sent them out of the building. It was tough, but we sent the whole math department to work with the math coordinator and one of our SILs a whole half a day to spend, because we just have math concerns that we wanted everybody to be a part of. So you just have to make a commitment to do those pieces. We use that time.
I just want to make one little clarification. There's data teams and collaboration. Data teams is a very collaborative process around student learning itself. It's just a very specific type, so I don't want to confuse that.
Well, and the data teams is denoted when you're looking at student data. If you were meeting as a collaborative team and you weren't looking at student data, it would be called a PLC. So it's just a wording piece.
Okay. Oh, one more.
On the collaborative effort inside your school, do the principals, do you guys do anything with other schools?
Twice last year, we did some collaborative PD with Callanan Middle School, which is a predominant, obviously, feeder school, which is why I'm pretty excited about the boundary changes, because we'll do more of that, and that's pretty significant. We need to be talking 6 through 12.
Or K-12.
Or K through 12. Yeah.
We've, as an elementary, been partnering with Phillips Elementary this year with our math professional development with the 5 Easy Steps to a Balanced Math Program professional development. So on 2 full day professional, the EQ day, and then the other full day, along with some pre-service days, Phillips and Finley have come together to discuss math practices and to take next steps with that.
And once a month, when the principals do get together, they do spend half of that day in collaboration on data from our buildings that we bring.
We also utilize the district-wide Wednesdays where teachers from across the district can come together as like content areas, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback. They like being able to collaborate with teachers outside of their building as well.
And Noelle, that's not just content area. For mathematics, it's grade band also. So all of the 6th grade mathematics teachers in the district all meet together and collaborate.
Right. Thank you.
At the end of the day, what is it doing for your student achievement within your buildings? Good question. And is this new? Have we seen a direct correlation to what we've been doing? So that's my question.
I would say when you take a look at the assessments, and it's key, that next step of what do we do now, that we have seen gains in areas by making sure that we really figure out what do our students need now, what do I need to do for these students, which path, do I need to set up some interventions, do I need to reteach, do I need to help them gain this certain skill. That has been very key by having that collaboration and those assessment times.
I think it's critical also that when we don't see those gains, as sad as it makes us go back to the drawing board. If we weren't giving the assessments and being responsive to them, our students wouldn't gain. Does that make sense? If we see that there's no growth, we have to take another path then. So we go back to the drawing board and go back to that collaborative process. I echo what you've heard teachers say, where my students just can't subtract. I have 5 kids that still can't subtract integers. I applaud that they know they have 5 students that can't subtract integers. 10 years ago, it would be a summative test where 5 students failed. And nothing was done because curriculum moved forward. Today, I know I have 5 students. I can do something about that. So even when the data comes back dirty, not so good, we can still respond to it. So the assessments are critical.
Yep, and I think what we've seen in our building is that on the content areas where we've had ongoing district benchmarks, which we use as our benchmarking of how we're doing, which would be math and science at this point because literacy is only a semester test. We've seen that our students have done better on the district benchmarks this year than they did last year, and we attributed that to those CFAs that have been predictive, that we've worked with those kids on what skills they were deficit on. So when it came to the benchmark, there were no surprises. We knew. We were very predictive of what they would do, and we've seen that they've done better on that. So our assumption is that that will continue to be predictive on larger assessments that are coming down the line, which would include the Iowa assessments. If we're that clear in marking our progress along the way, and we're seeing that on those benchmarking tests, that we'll see that on other bigger tests as well.
I think our building also has even taken one step further, and it may be in other buildings in the district. I like to think it's just my wonderful staff at Weeks, but we've gotten to the point where we're being responsive to even summative assessments. Mm-hmm. When in the past, I think those were an end-all. The formatives were the checkups and the summatives were the autopsies. And so now we're actually responding to the summative assessments. When we give a district benchmark, we have a tier intervention that we respond to students that have remained in the red zone on the post-test of the district benchmark, so that we're even responding to end-all data.
And I'd say at the elementary level, 2 indicators that we've been looking at is, number one, just echoing what Maureen said, our last math Unit 2 Unit 2 assessment, all of our grade levels showed increased achievement compared to last year. And so responding to what we learned from last year and adjusting that instruction has definitely showed gains. And then also we look at our number of students that are in that, we consider that red and orange zone. And as we look after, as we look at the grades as they progress, our number of students needing that intensive support, when we've had them for a longer period of time, it's much smaller compared to students that we haven't been able to adjust that instruction for and receive that intensive support. So our numbers are definitely getting smaller with the needs in that area also.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I think that wraps up this portion. One more.
This is mainly for the principals. One of them is my old principal, so How were you able to find the time for the daily planning? I know that an hour a day is probably pretty unusual for elementary schools. So how were you able to find that time every day?
It's called a commitment. You work with your folks who do your schedule, and sometimes they would come to me and say, Kathy, this is really difficult. If you just would allow us to do this, and I'd say, no. This is a priority. You have to have those folks work together. You have to release them so that they have that planning time. And it sounds rather simplistic, but I think maybe we need to help our colleagues. If they're struggling with that time, we need to, we maybe don't do enough of that, of sharing what our schedules look like, how we go about doing it, how we provide that time, because it can be done. You have to commit to it, otherwise it won't happen. And we did it through staffing budget cuts. It can be done.
And I think that's it. It's the commitment. I convened our teacher leadership group last year when we were looking at what our staffing numbers were budget-wise, and we kind of worked through a couple of scenarios, and the overwhelming response from the teachers was that whatever we need to do in other areas, we are committed to having this time. And so we're going to make that happen. And so then it's my job to make it happen in the schedule and then protect it from any other intrusions of that time. And that's a huge part of my job.
Now, don't take any more staff away from us. We're not telling.
Well, that's why I said those of us that are ending our SIG time,
Right.
It will be an even bigger challenge for those schools who are losing the school improvement grant funding to maintain that.
I don't want to sound Pollyannish about it, too, because here's what happens at Roosevelt. In order to do this, not every teacher gets to teach 6 out of 8 blocks. Most of our elective teachers are teaching 7 out of 8 blocks. They have to, because we need the electives, we need the offerings so that the teachers are off to meet. You'd have to look at the schedule to understand it, but I think you get it. And we tell those teachers there are things we don't ask them to do. They love being in their PLCs on Wednesdays. We give them time. Grants will pay for some time a lot during the summer for them to meet, but I also don't want to give the impression that every teacher gets this, because it is difficult. Mm-hmm. And they know that in a sense they benefit from our students in those 4 academic core areas progressing, doing well, reading and writing. They're committed to writing to learn strategies too, but I have to tell you, it's hard. It's hard to do it.
Sure.
Well, thank you very much. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate the time that you took to prepare for this, because we asked you to do a lot of work in preparation, and I think the board appreciates it. I know I learned a lot from this, and I think one thing I really learned is time. More than perhaps money is what's needed in order to improve the achievement of our students. So thank you very much for participating.